Why did this happen to us? President Bush told us,
"We did nothing to provoke that terrorist attack."
but some experts believe otherwise. Professors Mearsheimer and Wald, authors of The Israel Lobby and U.S. Foreign Policy, state that unquestioned American support for Israel has fueled Arab anger and resentment against the United States. The arch-terrorist himself told us, "Our terrorism against America is in order that America will stop supporting Israel, who kills our sons." Can you not understand this? It is very clear. Of course, supporting Israel means against all of its enemies, Muslim nations like Iraq, Iran, and Syria, as well as the Palestinians. In any case, this reason for the terror did not register with President Bush. Instead, he claimed,
"They hate our freedoms, our freedom of religion, our freedom of speech, our freedom to vote and assemble and disagree with each other."
Bin Laden responded, "We have been fighting you because we are free men who cannot acquiesce in injustice." And Professors Mearsheimer and Walt emphasized that, in fact, the United States has a terrorism problem in good part because it has long been supportive of Israel. This U.S. support of Israel is broad and deep. Muslim extremists are especially angry because we favor Israel in its conflict with the Palestinians. And they resent our stand with Israel against its foreign enemies. Enemies such as Iraq, Iran, Syria, and Hezbollah. Enemies that Israel has made through its conflict with the Palestinians. The 9/11 attacks were simply a reaction to our pro-Israel policies. But our leaders do not pause for such reflections. Rather than objectively analyze the reasons for 9/11, President Bush told Congress,
"We will direct every resource at our command to the disruption and to the defeat of the global terror network."
Thus, Bush declared war on terror. In the same speech, he warned,
"The Taliban must act and act immediately. They will hand over the terrorists, or they will share in their fate."
Of course, the Taliban did not hand over the terrorists, and soon we attacked Muslim Afghanistan. But before Afghanistan could be defeated, Bush warned Saddam Hussein,
"If the Iraqi regime wishes peace, it will immediately end all support for terrorism."
Though Iraq was not supporting terrorism, in March 2003, President Bush announced,
"At this hour, American and coalition forces are in the early stages of military operations to disarm Iraq."
Thus, we found ourselves attacking Israel's archenemy, and the war raged for years in Iraq. Rather than defeating terrorism, Bush threw fuel on the fire by these attacks on the Muslim world. While Iraq smoldered, newly elected President Obama warned us the Taliban is resurgent in Afghanistan, and Al-Qaeda supports the insurgency and threatens America from its safe haven along the Pakistani border. And soon the flames of war were leaping high again in Afghanistan. Undeterred, bin Laden warned, "Neither America nor anyone who lives there will enjoy safety until safety becomes a reality for us living in Palestine." Ignoring him, in 2009, Obama announced, "This troop increase is necessary to stabilize a deteriorating situation in Afghanistan." Will more force subdue Afghanistan and end terror? Or was bin Laden prophetic when he said, "Neither America nor anyone who lives there will enjoy safety until safety becomes a reality for us living in Palestine"? To summarize, we have attacked Muslim nations to combat terrorism. The terrorists say the way to end their attacks is to stop supporting Israel, especially against the Palestinians. But why shouldn't we support Israel? Answering this requires a closer look at Israel. Before 1948, the State of Israel did not exist, and Palestine looked like this. Despite the predominant Arab population, Israeli Prime Minister Menachem Begin claimed the Jewish people have unchallengeable, eternal, historic right to the land of Israel, that is Palestine, the inheritance of our forefathers. This supposed right of the Jews to Palestine is Israel's most basic principle. It presumes that God gave that land to the ancient Jews. Therefore, it is right that today's Jews should take it from its current inhabitants. Thus, Menachem Begin insisted Eretz Israel, that is Palestine, will be restored to the Jewish people of Israel. All of it, and forever. But Mahatma Gandhi, liberator of India, warned it would be a crime against humanity to reduce the proud Arabs so that Palestine can be restored to the Jews, partly or wholly, as their national home. Gandhi's words fell on deaf ears. A later Israeli Prime Minister, Yitzhak Shamir, declared, "We must have the land of Israel, and we have to fight for it, struggle for it." For Joseph Weitz, director of Jewish colonization of Palestine, that meant the only solution is Eretz Israel without Arabs, and there is no other way but to transfer the Arabs from here to the neighboring countries. Transfer all of them. Not one village or tribe should remain. Today we call this ethnic cleansing. The Zionists did not get rid of all the Arabs, but enough to create a dominant Jewish majority. This is key to understanding the conflict. Here's how being a refugee feels to one Palestinian woman.
حالي مأساة مأساة والله الدنيا كلها مأساة ما في رياحة.
As Gandhi said in 1938, it is wrong and inhuman to impose the Jews upon the Arabs. What is going on in Palestine today cannot be justified by any moral code of conduct. But Israel's founding father, David Ben-Gurion, wrote, "We must expel Arabs and take their places." And expel them they did. Here are some scenes from the ethnic cleansing of Palestine that began in 1947. Israelis claim that the Arabs want to drive them into the sea, but that has never come close to happening. Rather, the Israelis have driven the Palestinian Arabs into the sea. Many Palestinian civilians drowned in this panic caused by the Israelis shelling them on the beach during the 1948 war. Israel claims the Palestinians fled because Arab leaders called them out. But according to Israeli historian Ilan Pappé, Israel's founders carefully planned their expulsion. Under Plan D, the Zionists destroyed 531 Palestinian villages and drove out their inhabitants. This ethnic cleansing continues today as Israel destroys the homes and livelihoods of the remaining Palestinians.
my kids screaming and crying, and I'm freezing to the ground, can't do anything.
In these images, settlers from Zufim uprooted and destroyed 300 olive trees belonging to Tawfiq Hassan Salim of Jayus. Why did they do this? Because the trees of Mr. Salim grew on land coveted by the settlement for expansion. I was with Mr. Salim when he came upon this scene and learned that trees cultivated by his family for the past 300 years had been destroyed.
Zionists have never been gentle in their ethnic cleansing. In 1948, Ben-Gurion wrote, "There is a need now for strong and brutal reaction. We need to be accurate about timing, place, and those we hit. If we accuse a family, we need to harm them without mercy, women and children included." No wonder some Jews committed terror carrying out the ethnic cleansing. The New York Times reported that at the Palestinian village of Deir Yassin, there, contingents of the terrorist Stern Gang and Irgun attacked the village and lined men, women, and children up against walls and shot them. Here are scenes from the annual commemoration for the Arab victims of the Deir Yassin massacre. Israelis like to believe this massacre was an isolated incident. But according to Israeli historian Ilan Pappé, Israeli troops committed at least 31 such massacres. So much for the purity of arms, of which Israel often boasts. This terrorism could have been expected, for in 1937, Yitzhak Shamir, future Prime Minister of Israel, declared neither Jewish ethics nor Jewish tradition can disqualify terrorism as a means of combat. And in 1948, Ben-Gurion wrote, "There is no need to distinguish between guilty and not guilty." So he advised his soldiers to continue to terrorize the rural areas through a series of offensives. They got the message. According to Ilan Pappé, on 31 October 1948, the Jewish forces executed more than 80 villagers in the village of Hula alone, while in the village of Salihah, Israeli troops butchered more than 100 people. And to this day, the Palestinians are being crushed by Israel's so-called defense force. Returning to 1948, once expelled, the Palestinians could not be allowed to return, or there would not be a Jewish majority. So Ben-Gurion wrote explicitly, "We must do everything to ensure that they never do return." And woe to those who did try to return. British Lieutenant John Glubb reported that these Arabs returning to look for their homes were at first almost entirely unarmed. A great number of them were shot dead, without question or answer, by the first Israeli patrol they met. Thus Israel barred the Palestinian refugees from going home. And in 1967, Israel invaded the West Bank, where many of the 1948 refugees had taken refuge, and began expelling them and taking their property all over again. Listen to the shameful words of Ariel Sharon, Israeli Prime Minister, inciting his people to colonize the West Bank. Everybody has to move, run and grab as many hilltops as they can to enlarge the settlements, because everything we take now will stay ours. Everything we don't grab will go to them. Here's a typical Jewish settlement built on West Bank land grabbed from the Palestinians. Today, the plight of the Palestinians is approaching the racist vision of Raphael Eitan, former head of the Israeli army, who gloated, "When we have settled the land, all the Arabs will be able to do about it will be to scurry around like drugged cockroaches in a bottle." So here's the net result of Israel's ethnic cleansing and colonization as of 2000. Now, what are we to make of Barack Obama, who said this during his 2008 presidential campaign?
We know that the establishment of Israel was just and necessary, rooted in centuries of struggle and decades of patient work.
Really, Mr. Obama? Maybe you should read The Iron Wall by Jewish historian Avi Shlaim, who writes, "But there is no denying that the establishment of the State of Israel involved a massive injustice to the Palestinians." It should be clear why we should stop unconditionally supporting Israel. But our leaders are not about to admit this. Maybe it's time to take matters into our own hands. Let's start by taking a closer look at our support of Israel. Despite Israel's dark history, Congress and most American presidents have strongly supported Israel. In 1972, President Nixon declared, "I reiterate the American people's commitment to the survival of the Israeli state." President Ford followed suit, stating, "We shall continue to stand with Israel." And listen to former Ambassador James Akins describe the George W. Bush administration.
In fact, it's worse now than it's ever been before. We have a White House that's totally dominated by Israelis.
Does Akins exaggerate? In 2008, President Bush told the Israeli parliament,
"America is proud to be Israel's closest ally and best friend in the world."
Not to be outdone, a week later, candidate Obama told Florida Jewish leaders,
Israel's also developed many friendships, and none is deeper than the bond between Israel and the United States of America.
Eloquent, Mr. Obama, but not everyone thinks our bond with Israel is good for America. Charles Black, Yale law professor, wrote, "This relationship with Israel is sweepingly and grossly incompatible with our country's supposed dedication to the cause of human rights." Yes, we have betrayed our principles in supporting Israel's oppression of the Palestinians. And Obama should lend an ear to Mearsheimer and Walt, who state that, "Our research led us to conclude that the special relationship with Israel is now harmful to the United States and Israel alike." Nevertheless, during his presidential campaign, Mr. Obama promised,
As president, I will implement a memorandum of understanding that provides $30 billion in assistance to Israel.
and he did exactly that, despite the fact that Israel rejected his requests that it stop building settlements in Palestinian territory. But he is not alone. This $30 billion is just a continuation of our massive ongoing support of Israel, which involves much more than money. Mearsheimer and Walt found, as of 2005, direct U.S. economic and military assistance to Israel amounted to nearly $154 billion. That's over $31,000 for every Jewish Israeli. While several U.S. presidents have tried to broker peace between Israel and the Palestinians, only Eisenhower and the elder President Bush ever pressured Israel by withholding aid. As Moshe Dayan, former head of the Israeli military, boasted, "Our American friends offer us money, arms, and advice. We take the money, we take the arms, we decline the advice." Just so, Mr. Obama advises Israel that building settlements obstructs the peace process. Then he gives Israel billions that it can use for building settlements. Mearsheimer and Walt explain Israel is the only recipient of U.S. economic aid that does not have to account for how it is spent. This exemption makes it virtually impossible for the United States to prevent its subsidies from being used for purposes that it opposes, such as the building of settlements in the West Bank. Thus, Obama undercut his own aim to stop the settlements. This would be very harmful for America. As Jimmy Carter writes, "The United States is intensifying global anti-American terrorism by unofficially condoning or abetting the Israeli confiscation and colonization of Palestinian territories." Well, if helping Israel is causing terrorism against us, don't we need to ask, according to Eugene Byrd, president of the Council for the National Interest, we support Israel because Israel and the lobby, or Israel through the lobby, are really running the American policy. Bin Laden says basically the same thing, charging Western leadership acts under the Zionist lobby's influence for the purpose of serving Israel. And according to historian David Bialy, the American Jewish Israel lobby has developed into one of the most sophisticated and effective lobbying organizations in the United States Congress. How has the Israel lobby gained this power over our government? Stephen Weiss of the Center for Responsive Politics explains, if you are a candidate and you get a pro-Israel label from AIPAC, the money will start coming in from contributors all over the country. AIPAC is the American Israel Public Affairs Committee, the most powerful organization in the Israel lobby. It is where virtually every American politician goes to pledge his or her allegiance to Israel. Mearsheimer and Walt say this about AIPAC. Money is critical to U.S. elections, and AIPAC makes sure that its friends get financial support as long as they do not stray from AIPAC's line. Lots of money is involved. According to the Washington Post, from 1990 to 2006, pro-Israel interests have contributed $56.8 million to federal candidates and party committees. The Post also wrote, but it is money which arguably determines the very basics of our democracy: who runs, who wins, and how they govern. Senator Ernest Hollings of South Carolina obviously knows about AIPAC's money. He complained, you can't have an Israeli policy other than what AIPAC gives you. That suits Israel just fine. In 2006, Israeli Prime Minister Olmert declared, "Thank God we have AIPAC, the greatest supporter and friend we have in the whole world." Abhor bin Laden though we may, he got it right when he said, Western leadership acts under the Zionist lobby's influence for the purpose of serving Israel. Yes, fellow Americans, our support of Israel drove these attacks against us. And our one-sided support of Israel has led to these wars costing us dearly in lives and treasure. War, war, war. When will it end? First it was Afghanistan, then Iraq, then Afghanistan again, plus Pakistan. Very possibly we will attack Iran next. Iran, which like all Muslim nations, has indicated willingness to bury the hatchet with Israel, if Israel will do right by the Palestinians. These misbegotten wars incite more terror, which leads to more wars, which lead to more terror. Isn't it time to end this vicious circle? To do so, we must end our favoritism of Israel. We must instill fairness and justice into our policies toward Israel and the Palestinians. If Israel resists, we must use the powerful leverage of withholding aid, just as we already do toward the Palestinians. This requires that our politicians stop caving in to the Israel lobby. But they are under the spell of its money. This is doing immense harm to our nation. The most effective thing that we can do is to make Congress replace private campaign financing with public campaign financing. As Mearsheimer and Walt conclude, public financing of all elections would seriously weaken the link between the Israel lobby and U.S. elected officials. Until this, and more, is done to curb Israel's lobby, terror may continue to stalk us. Until this is done, the prospects for our endless, far-flung war on terror are daunting. Until this is done, there may be no end to the trouble that our servitude to Israel has brought upon us.